livestock. If he has goats, then he'll give about two of them, a male and a female one. So you keep them there, you make your own kraal there, and then you keep them there until they can start bearing children, right? Until they can give their young ones. And after you have a big, livestock that is there, then you return the two. The one that you were given initially, right? The same thing with cows. Cattle, you'll be given two, a bull and a cow. You give them there, you build whatever, how you do to keep them, to shelter them. You will look after them until they start bearing children. Once they've born children enough, and also they're capable of now eating on their own, and basically you do basically regard yourself now as an individual who owns something or has livestock, and they will let you until it's enough for you that even if they take these two away, it does not mess up your livestock anymore. And the concept of zakah, how does it work? The concept of zakah works in that very same way. That whoever in the society is a bit, underprivileged, zakah is supposed to be used in a sense that it should elevate him. If you find a brother, you're wealthy enough, you find a brother, alhamdulillah, you have everything, he doesn't have much, and if you see, if I open a business for this guy, it will help him to go through in his life. You help him with your zakah in a sense that he should be capable as well on his own to grow until he can give zakah, which means that the system has to enable him that he can live by himself. He has to be self-sufficient as well. He will have enough of his sustenance. This was a concept among our people that has always existed, has always been there. Unfortunately, right now, greed is kicking in and a number of things are changing. But what we need to introduce our people is that we are reviving their own tradition and their own tribal values, because they've always been there. It's a fact of the matter, and we cannot deny the fact that these values have always been there, and they're supposed to basically keep them. Inshallah, we'll take a very short break so I can have some water, and then inshallah we'll also continue once again. Inshallah. Jazakumullah. Now, inshallah, we will look at some of basically certain things that have survived history, like some traditions, and sometimes even it comes to even architectural influence, because we know that a tribe and a nation would have its way of communicating its message by virtue of what they write or by virtue of what they build. We know much of anthropology has been actually done when it comes to buildings, pottery, and so on and so forth. And we know this is how basically when excavations are done, this is how they tell a nation how the nation used to live and how this nation has basically carried out their traditions or the way that they used to do. So what I'll share with you is some few aspects. Of course, there's quite a number of other things that we could have looked at, but I've prepared these few, and hopefully, inshallah, throughout time, I'll also try and add some of the slides later on that elaborate on these very same aspects as well. What we'll look at basically is buildings. In the Zulu tradition and the Swati alike and other traditions, the place of living was built in that dome kind of this thing, right? They're called huts. Our huts, interesting enough, they're called ukuka sitandas, right? That's the name of the huts, called ukuka sitandas. And if I can translate for you, you know what it means? It means kneeling and praying. Right? And we find that this was recognized as a room which you wouldn't generally just go in there for fun. There would be certain things, like if there are certain rituals that need to be performed, then you would enter there. And by the way, the issue of separation was always there as well, whereby one side of the building or one side of the hut, there will be, like we have mats that are built called ukansi, right? So they would basically have one side used by the males and one side used by the what? The females. What is also very interesting, as Muslims, when we are maybe in the opening and maybe you say we need to do number one, right? Do we face the Qibla? No. We don't. Do we have our backs against the Qibla? We don't. Within the hut, there is a place that was recognized like that. You see like where the entrance is? Right across, that will be the Qibla of the hut. Which means that when you are sitting, you either sit adjacent to it or facing towards it. You can never sit against it, which means you can't go across and sit and face towards the entrance. You were never allowed. If you're a kid, you try to do that, you'd be beaten for that. Because it's recognized as the sacred area of the heart. Which is amazing for me, first of all, being a Muslim, that I have a direction that I have to make sure I'm careful about if I'm doing certain things. Now we know that certain times basically in human life, you have certain processes that you go through, and so much so that, like for instance, if a young male goes to maturity through a wet dream, for instance, then they will build a false fort for him that he has to be there because he has to purify himself. He can't use the very same room where these kind of rituals are performed, whereby slaughtering takes place and so on, or when these prayers are made, they basically take place. Of course now, as we did mention, that there were involvement of intermediaries after some time, but basically this was the respect that was given to this kind of a building. And I chose the Dome of the Rock for a very same reason. Mosques, masajid, the term masjid comes from what? Sujud, sajda, isn't it? Which means it's a place where there is a form of worship that is done there, whereby there is prostration, isn't it? While the Zulu heart is called ukukastandaza, which is also basically the same meaning. It has the essence of the same meaning, that is where you kneel and that is where you pray. And the masjid is called the very same way. Now, for me, I'd be gullible enough and say, you know what, this concept is the same. But what is most interesting is the fact that this is not only that, which means I'm not that gullible, but I might have some stance on that very same premise, because the issue of the Qibla is there. You can't sit against the front, or it's called Samo, by the way, in Zulu. I don't know how much you will memorize some of that for the non-Zulu speaking guys, right? It's called Samo, which means that part of the house, not everyone goes there, which means that those who are regarded as impure or unclean for certain reasons throughout life, whatever they go through, they're not allowed to be in that section. That is why also, even when everything takes place, or maybe certain rituals have to be performed, there will be one side observed by the males with their small seats and so on, and then the ladies, they're supposed to sit on their carpets. They have the carpets that are made for them. But there will be that male-female separation, so much so that if a man is a big guy, he has enough wealth to basically build as many, there will be one specifically built for females. Even the same thing when you go into the kraal, only the males were allowed to go into the kraal. If like maybe there is some slaughtering or anything that has to take place, even to the graveyards as well, which is something we'll go back to. There was always an aspect of saying certain individuals will come this far and then they end that far. We have been criticized as Muslims for making these separations, yet people forget that our own tradition has that. Which means that it is us who take the responsibility now as Muslims that we are discussing this, that we also tell our people this has been there. It shouldn't be strange to them. As you can see, even the architectural influence is there. The dome effect, you know. Even when you go, every mosque, one of the things that make a mosque to be regarded as a mosque is a what? A dome and a minaret, isn't it? Besides that, it's called a chamatkana or a prayer place. If those two are not there, it's still a chamatkana and a prayer place, right? And you find our people, they used to build this structure, and my understanding is there was an influence from someone who was given divine information, which would be a prophet of Allah in this case, and understanding as well. Another one, like what I spoke about, the Qibla, right? Interesting enough, when you're building the heart, there is something called intika, right? Intiga is basically would be like some kind of, I would say, a timber that is made right at the center of the heart, right? Right at the center of the heart, you will have that, which means that you know that after this, basically, you are entering the Umsamo region, which means that you are entering the sacred part of it. As you enter, what basically would happen is, as you enter as well, you have a sense of bowing that you basically do. That is why the entrance were made strategically that they are very short. So much so that even when you're entering, sometimes if they are so short, you have to crawl on your knees, because you can't stand tall now in a sacred place, which means that you have that sign of bowing and you have that sign of some prostrative move that you basically assume while you're entering there. Strange enough, when you enter the masjid, you have a manner of entering the masjid, like entering with your right foot. Of course, certain things won't be identical. but the concept will still, and the principle will still survive. Why? Because it's a principle that has been there, introduced, which tells us that it comes from the same source. And who can teach us better than the one who created us? This is how we can then recognize that prophets have been involved in this. And for Muslims, no matter where you are, if you have to pray, then you have to assume your Muslim direction. We have to face a certain direction, which is Mecca, alhamdulillah. And you can find this even in other previous traditions. Because we know the first Qibla was what? Was Jerusalem. There's a book in the Bible called the Book of Chronicles. People were advised that when they are praying wherever they are, they must face the direction of Jerusalem and raise their hands when they're praying. They were instructed like that. And our people as well, if they were to enter a place of worship, to go and tandaza, which is to pray, then they have certain things that they have to carry out, and the issue of cleanliness and so on and so forth. I'll also touch on that, inshallah, briefly, before we can conclude and take, inshallah, the question and answer session. I spoke earlier about how some prayers used to be conducted. There's a rite in Hajj, an Umrah like, where you go to Mount Mina, isn't it? And it's regarded as one of the greatest places where you can make your du'as. And your du'as, if they are made there, they are accepted. Our people, they would plant, say for instance, there's a lot of drought, right? They would plant their crops, knowing very well there isn't much rain. But the elderly of those, they will go to a top of a mountain. Strange enough, when they go there, they will, sometimes they'll come, if they have like maybe a lamb or a sheep or a goat or anything like that, that they will slaughter there, or even a chicken, right? Isn't it among Hajj we have also the slaughtering? Alhamdulillah, we're coming towards it very quickly, inshallah. We'll be chowing a lot of meat, alhamdulillah. So they will basically go up in the mountains and slaughter, and this is some of what they used to mention. They will say in Velinangi, which means Allah, send Unomkubulwane. Unomkubulwane was the name of an angel who's known to be responsible for rain, who's responsible for the clouds. In Islam, don't we have an angel which we believe that is responsible for rain? Yeah. Don't we? Yeah. Mikael is responsible for what? For rain and the growing of crops. Our people have this concept that we go up the mountain, we talk to God Almighty to send this angel who's always responsible for the rains. Now I'm asking, they wouldn't have just devised that. Someone must have told them that. And who better than a prophet, someone who was sent among them to give them this kind of a message? Because they will go up. There is one church right now, there is one group of people who are still trying to keep that as much as they can. They're called the Nazareth Baptist Church, known as the Chambers as well. Alhamdulillah, we were discussing with one brother yesterday who comes from that very same background. Because they knew, they understood that this concept has been there, and this concept used to be very effective, so much so that when they come back home, they'll be wet. Sometimes it will rain so much that they will have to go back again and ask for the rain to stop. Why? Because Allah would bless them so much that He will make it rain exactly. Why? Because they used to speak to Allah directly. And they used to have an understanding of how things work. The fact that Allah has delegated to some angels certain kind of duties and works. They will do that. They will come back with rain. That is why they were known. There were elders who were known. If they go up, they will come back with rain. Which means they will plant anytime they want to plant, because they know we'll go up, talk to the Almighty to tell His angel to give us some water and some rain and grow our crops. Sometimes it rains until they feel like this will even affect our crops if there's too much water like this. We are suffering from a number of places where there's a lot of drought. People have stopped worshipping Allah, asking from Allah. And don't we have Salatul Istisqa as Muslims, where we pray for rain? Yes, salam. You see, what I'm sharing with you, there's quite a number of other things. And unfortunately, time will never allow us to actually explore all of them to the detail. But these are some of the things that are there, that are existing among our people. Aqiqah. There is something known in the Zulu tradition, I think even in the Xhosa as well, and some other South African tribes, which is known as Imbeleko. Right? Imbeleko basically is what is used to carry a child, right? The one that to carry the child at the back is known like that. But what it meant basically was to slaughter something on the occasion of a birth of a certain child. As Muslims, we still have aqiqah, isn't it? If you have a son, you slaughter 2 sheep. If you have a daughter, you slaughter a sheep, and so on and so forth, right? But that tradition of slaughtering on the occasion of a new birth or of a newly born was done. And amazing enough, it was done so that this is regarded as a protection for the child, which means that if God Almighty blesses this child, will look after this child, and so on and so forth, then it will be safe. So much so that if sometimes they couldn't manage to do it, there will be a number of things taking place, occurring in the child's life, then they'll realize, we never did that. It was among the beliefs, and I think some people, they still hold that belief. That is why they'll try and do something. Now they've added something where they put a wristband after doing it for you, right? But this was a tradition that has always been there, and Islam basically tells you do the same thing. So how is it then people have to look at Islam as a strange thing, as a strange concept? We need to tell them, this is your thing. South Africa, what is famous in South Africa is the fact that Islam is for Indian people. Indian and Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and so on. That is why when you come up as a Muslim, when we were doing dawah in, I think it was Phoenix, one young lady, when I gave her a pamphlet, she was like, you also Muslim? I was like, yes, I am. She was surprised, you Muslim? You know what I mean? Because there is that race attachment to it, in some sense or another, and we need to try our best to actually push this forth so that people understand that we are actually reviving our values, our traditions, because Islam is not a new thing to our people. It's not a new thing. It wasn't called Islam because Islam is an Arabic term. It was regarded as Ubuntu. That is why it wasn't just a term that was named after somebody. It was a concept of life. And Islam is not a religion. It's a way of life, governed by the values of religion. And we need to also try and communicate that message, because I know people, they ask you what's your religion and you immediately say Islam. You need to tell them, listen, my way of life is Islam. And within Islam, there's a concept of what is known as religion, which means that what you have to believe in, like the oneness of Allah, the angels, and other aspects. But it's a way of life altogether, just as how the concept of Ubuntu has always been a way of life for our people. Burials. This is something closer to our burials that used to be performed before. Now I'll share one principle that survives, right? Before, because we had enough cows and everything, we had enough cattle, right? And we used to use the skins for clothing, right? So we were like, hey, why are you wearing a skin? It has been like that. That was our mode of basically dressing. What would happen though, if a person